really life in so many ways is about understanding how to ask more effective questions. And if you can start thinking in the form of a question, your ability to communicate at a high level is dramatically more effective. The guy that came up to me, did he have the answer to his question already? Of course, the answer is yes. He had the answer. But my job was to do what, Chris? Deliver a path whereby he could find the answer. The answer is best discovered by the audience, not forced upon them. Because people like self-discovery, but we don't like to have stuff forced upon us. There is an art to a perfect question. A great question always denotes in the mind of the audience progress. Someone should clearly have a sense that if they're being asked a question, there's a strong purpose to it. You want to ask the question in such a way that it causes the person to go deep quickly. You stop using questions out of love, truth, and genuine curiosity. That's called manipulation. If you're going to be an outrageously effective communicator, you have to be okay not being the hero of the story.
Welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Purpose. My name is Chris Kiefer, and today's guest is Marcus Sheridan. He's the author of They Ask, You Answer, one of the top 5 marketing books of all time, and the brand new USA Today bestseller, Endless Customers. He's partner at Impact. He still runs river pools, and he delivers around 70 keynotes a year to audiences around the world. But today's conversation is not a marketing interview. Marcus built his career teaching businesses to answer their customers' questions with radical honesty. What most people don't know is where that instinct actually came from. A 2-year mission in southern Chile when he was 19 years old, when he learned that the greatest way to teach someone isn't to give them an answer, but it's to ask the right question so they can discover it for themselves. Today, we go deep into that origin story, into a communication framework he calls the Pathfinder system, and the 3 Ps of a perfect question, and into one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard on this podcast about a man who walked up to Marcus after a marketing keynote and asked him for help with his marriage. We talk about the pride cycle, about why he homeschools his kids the same way he coaches CEOs, about a game he plays with his children called the Isn't That Awesome, that I'm actually going to steal for game night tonight with my family, and about what happens when you ask your wife, if you could change one thing about me, what would it be? This is one of those conversations that's going to change how you talk to your kids, your spouse, your team, and yourself. Marcus, welcome to The Pursuit of Purpose.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm all about a good conversation to stimulate the brain, the mind, the soul. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you first, just because I briefly mentioned this, but and I went down like memory lane this morning as I was preparing for this, but I don't remember who told me about They Ask, You Answer, but I read it and it was just like, which I'm sure you hear all the time. It just was like, it made sense. Like I had experienced it personally. And at the time, I had just stepped into this marketing director role for a concrete coatings company. And I like pitched it to the owner of the company, and he was like, I mean, if you want to do this, Chris, like he basically just gave me freedom to run. And we hired a videographer, a copywriter, a graphic designer, and we started we went on this mission of like, we're going to answer like, what does a concrete coatings cost? And there were all these like industry, like in this group of dealers of this product Pentec that we sold. Everybody was like, you never talk about price on the phone. You got to go show up in person. And, and we just like flipped the whole thing on its head. And I was looking, and unfortunately they like rebranded their company, and the old website got like morphed into a new one. So like the formatting and the styling of my beautiful, like super long blog pages and stuff with the graphics and videos and everything that we had intertwined, it doesn't look quite as good. But some of them are actually still ranking, and they haven't been touched for like on first pages, and they haven't been touched in like 5 years or so since I left. So anyways, I just wanted to tell you that I'm forever grateful for that like inflection point that happened in my career from fully diving into your philosophy.
That's cool, man. The stuff works. And I always feel good when somebody says, it just made so much sense, right? Because that's that to me is the mark of like really clean communication and education. And that's what I want to hear. What I don't want to hear is like someone say, "Man, you are so freaking smart." Because the problem with that is that oftentimes when somebody says, "Oh man, you're such a genius," or whatever, that means they're seeing you on a pedestal.
The
And,
excuse is an
and
opt out for them.
yeah, well, it might not be attainable in their mind, the thing that you did, unless
Mm,
they're also a genius. Whereas if they're like, "Man, this is obvious, man. It's like common sense." That's the win. If you can boil a subject to that, you're gonna have conversion. I mean, people are gonna change
yeah.
their behavior, and that's what I'm after.
That's awesome. So I'm talking about this mission that we went on at Webfoot, in the concrete coatings marketing and whatnot. But I want to go back to the research that I did. It looks like back in 1997, you were on a mission down in Chile, and I wonder if you could just tell the story of like what happened. There was apparently a baptism that got delayed, and then you had to like fill some space or something. But just walk me through that because I feel like this is the origin story of a lot of the stuff that you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm a convert to the LDS church. I joined when I was 17 years old, and, I decided to go on a mission for my church after my freshman year in college, which is funny, right? Because I told this to my family, none of them are members of the church to this day, and they all freaked out because 'cause they're like, "You're leaving college, you're not gonna go back." I'm like, "No, this kinda happens all the time within the LDS culture." It's like, it's just it's all good, and, so I went to Chile, didn't know really any Spanish at all, for 2 years to teach the gospel, and, boy, was it great because I got my teeth kicked in. I mean, just absolutely hammered from a language perspective. I really, really struggled, and it was slow for me. I studied like incessantly, and I was still really, really slow to pick it up. I was so slow to pick it up compared to a lot of my peers, that is, that I was like, man, I got to get my hearing checked. Maybe it's a hearing problem. It was like, no, no, I was just slow to learn the language. All right, now, one time, uh, I had been in the field now in Chile for about it's like my month 4. Okay. And, I was in an area of the southern end of Chile, and, this particular, area is called Victoria, a little town in Chile. And, my companion, because you're always with another missionary. I was with a companion, his last name was Orellana. He was from Chile as well. So, and they call him elder. So I was Elder Sheridan, he was Elder Orellana. And we were teaching this one lady who was a pretty big influence in the town, and she decided to get baptized. And so, the way that it works is, you get baptized in a font. And by the way, if you're listening to this right now, this is not a religious story. This is a story about communication. So I promise there's going to be a payoff to communication, and probably more than that. But don't let the religion part like turn you off. Because come on, I mean, we're talking here about like a life experience, right? Whether you're Christian or not, it's like, that there's a big takeaway here. Okay. So with that being said, we schedule this baptism, and we show up about 4 hours early, to fill up the font, because there's like you stand up in the font, and it's like chest high water, and it's like a really big deep bathtub. And in Chile, it takes like 3 hours to fill this thing up with warm water. Okay. And so we fill the font, we start filling it, and then we leave, and we come back later for the service. Okay. So we have this the service gets started, and there's a ton of people that have shown up from the town, which is pretty exciting for missionaries because like, wow. So we got this one lady, she's getting baptized. She's brought a bunch of family members, she got community friends. We had a bunch of members of the church that were there. So we had like 100 and some people at this particular baptism. So we need this moment to go really well. There's a lot riding on it. And the way that it works is that everybody meets in what would be like the main salon area, and then they go to the area where there's the font, but the font is behind closed doors. And so we start the ceremony, and then everybody gets up and we go to the font area for the baptism. And we open up the doors to the font. And then as soon as we open up the doors, our hearts sink because we see the font is empty. And you have 100 and some people just waiting to watch this baptism. This lady's like waiting to walk into the water, and there's no water. That's right. And we're like, what the heck? Somebody had pulled the font, like the plug. And there's actually two other female missionaries there, sister missionaries in this case, I call them. And they were both from Latin America. So I was the only one that spoke English of these group of this like 4 missionaries that were there. And like everybody's looking down this empty font. They have people that are there that they've invited. We've got all these people that we've invited. We're looking at this empty font. And then everybody, I can feel like I'm looking down, but then slowly everybody starts to look over at me, all like the 3 missionaries, as if to say, Elder Sheridan, what are you going to do about it? And it was just like this critical moment of my life where I looked at them and I said, just fill the font. I'll take care of this. And I told everyone in probably not beautiful Spanish, let's all get back into the chapel. And we got to fill the font up. We're going to fill it as quickly as possible. No worries. We're going to have a lesson. And so I get in front of this group, 100 and some people. You got people that are members of the church, non-members of the church. And I asked a question, just a solid question about something that was gospel related to the group and about how the gospel had affected somebody's life. And somebody in the group answered the question, and then somebody else followed up what they said with another comment. And I asked a further question about that comment. And then suddenly what was happening, within a few minutes, you could just feel this incredible warmth just descend upon the room. And you had all these people that were discussing what in this context was the gospel of Jesus Christ and their own life experiences with it from different creeds, from different religions. And I was the one that was guiding the conversation. And before you know it, I can see my companion, Elder Orejana, waving to me in the back of the room as if to say, the font is full. Now, he had filled it with cold water, but an hour had passed in a blink with this group. And the lady goes ahead and she gets baptized. And many of the people in the room that day ended up getting baptized later on because of the experience they had had. But the catch to this was this. That night, the lady that we live with, there was an older lady in our church unit, and we stayed in her house. She came up to me and she said, Elder Sheridan, I've been with you now for a month. You're not good at Spanish, but tonight you dominated the language. That's what her exact words. You dominated the language. What happened? What happened? She was in awe because remember, she had been speaking with me for 30 days and thinking to herself, he's not very good at the language, doesn't speak well. And then suddenly she watches me get in front of a group of about 125 people, and I completely dominate the language. So what happened there? Well, a few things that happened, but the biggest thing that happened was this. I didn't say a lot, but I did have the ability from a young age, and I still do, to ask effective questions. And all I did in that moment is I just kept asking more questions. I'd listen well, and I would ask the questions. And the course of that stimulated this incredible conversation. And so I learned from there that really life, in so many ways, is about understanding how to ask more effective questions. And if you can start thinking in the form of a question, your ability to communicate at a high level is dramatically more effective. So later on in life, just to put this in context, Chris, I actually created an entire communication system. We call it the Pathfinder system that is built on how to ask better questions, more effective questions. And I teach it to leaders. I teach it to salespeople. Our team does. It's very, very life-changing. But it started for me, really the catalyst moment was that moment that day.
And that's the question first group, right?
And that's the question first group.
Yeah.
But can I tell you one more story?
Mhm.
That was the second catalyst.
Yep.
Is that all right with you? Okay. So one time, for a long time, I was just speaking about sales and marketing, for the most part, marketing, and not really this interpersonal communication stuff. And I had just gotten done speaking to a bunch of landscapers in Dallas, Texas. And I, in the process of doing this, at the end of the talk, I'd finished up and I was in a rush to leave because I had to catch a flight. I had to catch a flight fast. And I had an Uber waiting for me outside. And I was next to the stage where I had just spoken. I was packing up my bags and I was really in a blitz to quickly get in the Uber that was waiting for me so I could quickly get to my flight and not miss the dang flight. Well, just in this moment, as I'm packing up, I see someone from the audience that had just heard me speak. He's walking up to me with a super concerned look on his face. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I do not have time for a long conversation right now. I could tell this guy's got something wrong with him. But at the same time, I'm thinking, like, this guy's in pain and I want to help him resolve his pain. So he comes up to me and he says the most unusual thing that you could ever expect someone to say to you after hearing you speak on marketing. He comes up to me and he says, Marcus, can I ask you a question? I'm like, yeah, man, what's going on? He says, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm just going to tell you this. My wife bites her nails incessantly. It's driving me crazy. I don't want it to drive me crazy. We've tried everything. We're at wit's end. At this point, I don't know what to do. I don't know why she's doing it. What should I do? But he's saying it to me and you could just feel the pain. So for you and me, this might sound like what a silly, weird concern. But for this guy, this was like the thing that was on his mind. Now, the problem is I've got to get in that Uber and we have no time here, Chris. But we have to solve, if we can, this guy's problem, and we want to solve it immediately. Now, the thing is, there is an art to a perfect question. And when people understand the art, then suddenly they create breakthroughs with those around them much quicker than they ever did before. There's essentially, if you want to follow it as a roadmap, the perfect question, or in this case, the perfect question consists of what we call the 3 Ps of a perfect question. And I'm going to tell you the end of the story here in a second, but let me give you the baseline to everybody understand how you solve this guy's problem in this moment. Number 1, a great question always denotes in the mind of the audience progress. They have to feel progress. If they don't feel like you're making progress, they're going to get frustrated. And they're going to get frustrated by saying, where are we going with this right now? Where are we going with this question? Okay. So if anybody's ever said to you before, where are you going with that question? It's because they're not feeling progress. Or somebody ever tells you, I just told you that. It means they're feeling like they're repeating themselves. The question that you're asking is a repeat of something they already said. They have to feel progress. Okay. That's the first P. Second P is purpose. Very similar to progress. Someone should clearly have a sense that if they're being asked a question, there's a strong purpose to it. The way you know that you failed here is if somebody ever says to you, why did you ask me that just now? So they didn't sense the purpose, right? And so it's like, where are you going with that? And why did you ask me that? They shouldn't feel that, which is why if you're ever asking someone a question that is really a difficult question to answer out of the blue or very, very deep, you need to preface the question oftentimes by saying things like, now listen, this question might not make sense to you right now, but I promise it has a purpose. So work with me here. All right, that's an example of getting in front of it. Now, the third P to a perfect question, this is the hardest one, is path. You want to ask the question in such a way that it causes the person to go deep quickly, but they can still find the thing because there's a direction that's been given, i.e. a path. So for example, if I said to you, Chris, what's your greatest memory? Not a great question because your brain could go in a million directions. Whereas if I said to you, Chris, what's your greatest memory as a child with your mother? Now all of a sudden it's like pop, pop. You just go to it fast. You see what I'm saying? Child took you one level deeper, with your mother took you the next level deeper, and you might remember something right now that you haven't thought about for years. Right? So that's path. Now, let's go back to the guy that was struggling with the nail biting. Now, oftentimes when I share that scenario, share this story with folks and say, well, what would you say? People will say things like, well, I would say, do you love your wife? All right, let's think about it. Would he have come up to me with that look on his face if he didn't love his wife? Of course he loved his wife. So if I say, do you love your wife? He's not going to feel like we're making progress. He's going to get frustrated. He's not going to sense a strong purpose in the question. Again, he's just going to get frustrated. So that question is not helpful. People say all the time, well, what have you tried? Remember, if you were listening to what the person said, he said, we've tried everything. So if I say, what have you tried? And he says, I just told you we tried everything. See, we're not making progress. Feels like he's having to repeat himself. That's a problem. See, a lot of people aren't listening so well to the question that's being asked, and they're not so present that they hear everything that was just said to them because they're too worried about, what am I going to say next? And so, whereas if you can really sit with a person just like deeply, it's magic. So, in this context with this guy, by the way, I was with a group of 250 business coaches one time. And these are supposed to be some of the best question askers in the world, a business coach, right? And I presented to them this scenario. And the group concluded there wasn't time to solve the problem because we only had 60 seconds. They said, you should take it offline. That was their conclusion. I said, yeah, but if you could solve the problem in less than 60 seconds, would you want to know how? And of course, the answer is yes. So here's the question that I asked. And it came to me like as if God placed it right in my mouth. The question that came out was, has there ever been a time in your marriage when she wasn't biting her nails? Now, as soon as I ask the question, Chris, he stops, he looks up, and he says, well, come to think of it, which, by the way, when somebody stops, looks up, and says, come to think of it, what's happening right then is what we call a light bulb moment, an aha moment. That's the breakthrough. He says, come to think of it, we were separated for a period of time. We got back together. And for about the first 6 months after we got back together, she wasn't biting her nails. I then said, what were you doing then that you're not doing now? And I kid you not, Chris, the guy looks at me square in the eye. He starts, like a tear starts to roll down his cheek. He nods at me as if to say, I understand now. And he walks away and didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. Now, 2 questions asked. The key to this, though, that people need to understand is this. The guy that came up to me, did he have the answer to his question already? Of course, the answer is yes. He had the answer. But my job was to do what, Chris?
Guide him.
That's right. Guide him. Deliver a path whereby he could find the answer. Now, I did not know what the answer was. So I can't feed him what I think it is. I need to ask the perfect question in that moment. But it's got to have the perfect path. There's really only one question that would have worked in that moment. It's just, has there ever been a time when she wasn't biting her nails? So we could immediately go back to that point. And the other thing is I didn't give an answer. The answer is best discovered by the audience, not forced upon them. Because people like self-discovery, but we don't like to have stuff forced upon us. That's just very, very human for whatever reason. Now, this is a tough skill, Chris. And oh, by the way, there's plenty of times when I will fail to create the breakthrough when I want it, because there's just moments when you fail to ask the right question, you're not thinking clearly enough or whatever. But I could tell you, when I got into that Uber and drove away, I had 2 thoughts. First thought was, how did that question come into my mind? Well, I think there's two answers. One, it was clearly God wanted that gentleman to get an answer that day, and I give him most of the credit. But the second part of the reason why it came to mind was for the better part of 30 years, I've been thinking about how to ask better questions. Started as a missionary because I was extremely effective at teaching the gospel, and I had a ton of success and baptized an inordinate amount of people. Why? Because of a framework of communication. I didn't know I was doing it then, looking back, yes. But a key part of that was learning to ask incredibly effective questions, knowing the perfect energy for the interaction of the moment, which a lot of people don't know, don't understand. And I've been obsessed with it ever since then. And, the second thing that I thought about when I drove off in that Uber that day is, why did he ask me? Why did he ask me that? Because I've been teaching about marketing. But people can sense an energy when if they're with you, like especially in a teaching environment like that. They can sense an energy and they can tell if it's all about you, if you're trying to be the hero of your own story, if it's about others. And that's really a big part of this too, Chris, and then I'll shut up, is if you're going to be an outrageously effective communicator, you have to be okay not being the hero of the story.
Is there that's a fascinating story. I love that. And I know exactly what you mean by when you get to know somebody or you're listening to them, you just kind of it's how the gut feeling of like, is this a trustworthy person? Like, are they coming across as trustworthy, right? Like we've all experienced that. I'm curious, was there, when was a time when someone asked you the perfect question that like did the same thing that you did to this guy with the nail biting? Do you recall a moment where you were like, wow, and there was like an unlock that was gifted to you in the form of a question?
Yeah, that is a great question there. And um, because I don't have an immediate answer, right? Because I haven't thought about that. There's one that I, there's one that I can't share because it's one of those like it affects other people. But I was getting ready to make a bad professional decision, and one of my dear friends who is a business partner at Question First Group, and one of the people that I taught this to, and now he teaches it to others, and he of course uses the same thing on me. He asked me a question that was so clear, black and white. And oftentimes a great question boils down to just presenting two choices to someone and making them choose between the choices. And then after they make the choice, asking them to explain why they made that choice. And so he helped crystallize it. And he said, okay, so it sounds like you got two choices from what you said. You can do this or you can do this. Now be honest, Marcus, which one do you feel in your gut better about? I said, I feel much better about this one. He said, why do you feel so bad about that one? And then I gave the list, this, and this. And then he said, then why are you getting ready to make this decision? And I said, I'm going to put a stop on it tonight. And I did. It was one of the most important professional decisions I've ever made.
And you feel like if he hadn't asked you that, or I guess you were already feeling some turmoil and going to him for guidance or hoping that he could lift some fog.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit bothered, but I think he was bothered too. But the key was he had to really I have a tendency sometimes just to if I'm really annoyed with something, ignore it and accept it, um, and then regret ignoring it later. It's pretty human, right?
Mm.
We all do it to different degrees. Um, but in this case, I had, yeah, I was feeling a very strong restlessness, and I had mentioned it to him a few times. But the problem was is I hadn't slowed things down to make the decision really black and white. And this is why we need great coaching in our life. All of us do. I do, you do, we all do. Those that don't have great coaching, great mentors, great listeners in their life, they tend to make poor decisions because they don't ever verbalize the things that are there. They just need to come out. And this is oftentimes, if we just say it, then now we've got the strength because we finally admitted the thing. Now we can take the action. But until that point, if someone doesn't, if someone doesn't help facilitate that, we have a problem. Now, the issue though is for a lot of people, Chris, when you get good with questions, you can use it nefariously. And classic phrase, with great power comes great responsibility.
Mm.
And so when you stop using questions out of love, truth, and genuine curiosity, that's called manipulation. When you're trying to dictate the outcome that you want because it's about you and what you think versus what truly is best for the person. Now we are using engineered manipulation.
Mm.
There's a name for that person. We call them the lawyer. They are not. There's a lot of leaders that communicate that way. And because of that, they get people to say yes to things, and the person ends up regretting it later and gets very frustrated because they feel like it wasn't their idea. They were tricked.
I'm thinking of what you just said. I relate to it, of the tendency to ignore things that bother me and then regret it later, which reminds me of like the pride cycle that you talk about.
Yeah.
It seems like a great personal example of that, of like when you're in that place of comfort after success, that you're kind of like, you know what? I probably should deal with that, but I'm doing fine.
Yeah, we get fat, we get happy, we get lazy, we don't do the little things. The saw gets dull because we're cruising now and we're in a place of prosperity. And so because we stop doing the little things, suddenly things, oftentimes without us even realizing it, before it's too late, slide to the point where we lose that momentum and we get back to a place of pain. And because we're in pain, we say, daggone it, I don't like pain. So we start doing the little things again. And we start doing them and we get momentum on our side and we get back to a place of prosperity. Once again, we get fat and happy. We stop doing those little things and you rinse and repeat. This is why people gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight. This is why our health goes up and down. This is why oftentimes our relationships go up and down. This is why entire countries and civilizations go up and down. This is why you tend to go back and forth from political parties, back and forth and back and forth, back and forth.
Or generationally, just like it's the classic. I've heard the pride cycle applied to generations, which you might remember, but it's like the good times lead to or hard times lead to strong people. Strong people, that, you know what I'm saying?
Good times, create soft, like
Weak
soft
people, yeah.
men and women, and soft men and women create bad times.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's exactly that.
The thing I love about entrepreneurship, and I'm like, it's been a huge blessing for myself and just for my wife and I. And now with raising kids, our oldest daughter's 8. You have older kids than I do. I'm wondering, how do you like, obviously from your business perspective, you go, teach businesses how to apply these things to their business. How do you like take this stuff and educate your kids in like a collaborative, fun way? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like the one thing that I want to make sure that I pass on to my kids are these principles like this, or just like the value of hard work and things like that.
Yeah. My kids have been doing role plays with their dad since they were like very young. And
Role
which is
plays?
crazy. Role plays. Yeah. We do role plays. Like if you met my kids in a social setting, you'd be like, wow, they're really socially advanced. All my kids were homeschooled too, though. And a lot of people think that when a kid is homeschooled, that they're going to be socially awkward. Have you ever met somebody that was socially awkward that went to school? It's
Yeah.
it's about the
Exactly.
dumbest
Yeah.
statement of all time.
Yeah.
If you look at how people were generally educated traditionally with a leadership education model, typically it was done with a tutor, and they found their thing earlier on, and they were able to lean into those things. So, for example, my son, when he was 16, started working full time as an electrician. He's 23 today. He is a part owner in my electrical. We have an electrical company together. I'm not an electrician at all. He's got his journeyman's. He'll have his master's next year. He's got zero debt. Makes six figures. 23, 23 years old, and just crushing, and didn't waste any time. We're really big believers in our home of never let your schooling get in the way of your education. Um, Mark Twain said that, and I continue to believe it. I think most of college today is a sham. Now, you might say, well, college was good for you. That's fine. It can be great for you. I went to college. That doesn't mean the business model is not a sham.
I want to just one thing, or I want to come to that. You actually, this is one of the posts I went back when I was researching in 2019. You probably remember that you made a post on X about your son's 16. He's homeschooled. He works 2 full days a week as an electrician. He won't be going to college. He's likely going to own his first home by 20. He'll likely be making six figures by 22. He'll have no debt. Oh, and he's happy and fulfilled.
He got a GED. A lot of people are like, oh, he didn't get a high school diploma. What's a high school diploma? What's it mean? Doesn't mean anything. Why? Like, it was clear that he had a learning style that was not going to fit a conveyor belt model. He wasn't going to sit around all day. That wasn't going to work for him. He'd rather, like bang his head in the wall all day long. So why would I commit him to that? This is what we do as parents. And so I, none of it made sense to me. Just like with my oldest daughter, when she was she was our only child that actually went to school. She went to school in 8th grade up. Beginning in 9th grade, I said to her, "It's your first year of high school. You got two options. You can go to high school. It'll be fine. High school. Or you can go with me for 6 months around the world. I happen to be speaking all over Europe. I'm going to be in Africa. I'm going to be in North America. You can go with me on every single event. Your choice." I said, "But the problem is you're going to miss a lot of stuff. You're going to see a lot of things online. You're going to miss all the fun activities. But you're also going to have moments that you'll never forget. And oh, by the way, when you get back to school, you're going to be completely screwed up. Your call. You can decide." And she's like, "What?" I said, "I don't even want to know right now. I want you to go ponder this, and you can get back to me." And so she got back to me. She said, "I want to do it." And, because of that, as soon as she got back to school, Dad, she's like, "School is outrageously inefficient." Of course, yeah, sure is, isn't it? She's like, "Look at all the things that don't make sense." I know. Doesn't make sense, does it? Right? But she ended up just getting her GED and went to college. You see what I'm saying? Why wait? Well, like, why do we do these things?
Yeah, just arbitrary time gates.
Yeah, it's like everybody, it's almost like, do you think we all have the same genetic DNA? It's ridiculous. So to think, like, we say dumb things like, they're at a 9th grade reading level. What does that even mean? What is, are you kidding me right now? So I just didn't care about any of that stuff. I don't believe in grades. Do you know why? Because in my professional life, I've never gotten a grade. And you can game all those things. So it's like A, B, C, D. What does that mean? So I teach my kids the meritocracy. I teach them the law of the harvest, that they are going to reap what they sow. And, for that, incredible. But also know that the university system that exists today, it's not going to exist in 10 years. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Look what's happening with AI. We're already seeing that, like, we're going to blow up the entire education system, as we should. The fact that it's way outpace the rate of inflation. Just goes back to the fact that it's a Ponzi scheme. This doesn't mean there's not great teachers and great professors and great like people, right? It just means
I like that calling out of, I think sometimes people, it's like they're defending college because of like a great professor that they had. And it's like, no, 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 no. The rest of the system is like, it's not even serving that professor as good as it could.
yes. And if you are sending your kids out and allowing them to get six figures in debt, shame on you. At the same time, I don't think it's your responsibility as a parent to come up with six figures to send your kid to school. That's probably not going to help them either. So it's like the models are broken. And so I'm one that just says, I look at something like this doesn't make sense. Why conform? I don't want to like break the rules just to break the rules. I'm going to look at something and say, is this really the smart way to do it? Just because everybody's doing it like this, is there a better, more efficient, more effective way? And so, I say all this saying that like my kids, we like if you said to them, "Do you ever do role plays with your dad?" Like, oh, my dad and I, we've been doing role plays ever since we were young. We have deep conversations, teach them everything that I have learned, and because of that, like, my kids, world class speakers. Like you can put them in front of an audience, doesn't matter. Like at any of their ages, they'd blow you away. How good they are in front of an audience. Super, super effective communicators because of it.
What's an example of like, give me a role play or for like if I'm like, okay, I want to do this tonight with my 8 and 6 year old. What's an example of a role play that I could do as a parent?
Yeah. So, one example was my girls, my kids, they didn't have cell phones till they were older. In fact, I learned that, with each one that passed, like, I need to go even higher on like even older before they start with the smartphone and social and all that stuff because they're basically worse than drugs. I'd rather you give, I'd rather you give a 12-year-old crack than let them be on TikTok. I'm serious.
Mm.
We're going to look back and we're just going to indict ourselves and just feel so guilty for the things that we allowed to happen, with these digital drugs that we fed our children. And so, of course, the pressure on parents is, well, all their friends have phones. And if all their friends have phones and they go to these events, then they're going to feel really, really uncomfortable. So an example of this would be if I say to my girl, okay, so let's say you got a bunch of friends around you and they're like, where's your phone? Why don't you have a phone? You have some choices. So what are some your potential choices? And then we would talk about like responses. So the response that makes the kid feel worse is, yeah, my parents don't allow it, right? So they're not going to say that. First, they're going to learn how just to defend, but then they're going to learn to ask questions, right? So my daughter had a trip one time. She was on a field trip. It was with a bunch of other homeschool kids. And a couple of the girls she was in a circle with, they were, messing with their phones. My youngest wasn't. Her name's Pink, by the way. That's her nickname, Pink. Everybody calls her Pink. And her sister named her Pink, so that's what we call her, Pink. And so they say, Pink, why don't you have a phone? Now, she's good, right? She's good. And she says, well, do you really want to know? That's the first question. Do you really want to know? I'm like, well, yeah, everybody has a phone. And she's like, okay. Well, tell me about what happens when someone is on their phone all the time. Like, what are the problems or the drawbacks to that? This question she asked to the girls. Like, oh, well, yeah, I guess, it's like really, they don't focus and they're constantly like thinking about the text and Pink's like, yeah, and what else? And what else? Okay, good. All right. All right. And then she says, and so ultimately, like, how does that make you feel? Like this makes me feel like anxious. She says, that's exactly why I don't have a phone. And then she says, how we always finish these types of things, the classic phrase, which is, And isn't that awesome? And then the girls in our group say, that is awesome. And guess what they all did, Chris?
Put their phones down.
They all put their phone down.
Yeah.
So we play a game in our house that's called Isn't That Awesome? And what it is somebody comes to you and says, why don't you do such and such? And your job is to get to the point where you're able to say, and isn't that awesome?
Mm.
So, for example, my daughter doesn't date till she's 16. You can't date till you're 16? Right? So it's question, question, question. And finally she says, and isn't that awesome? And it flips the whole thing on its head.
Mm.
And so they know how to do this. Now, I started this with my kids, but later on I taught it to salespeople. I taught it to leaders. It's the same thing. And to this day in our workshops, we call it the Isn't That Awesome game. Because if you learn it, doesn't matter what the person says. Like, yeah, I'm really concerned about your business because it got a bunch of negative reviews online, and I just don't know if we should use you. Okay, so if you know Isn't That Awesome games, you're like, okay, I gotta finish this so that they say, isn't that like I'm able to say, isn't that awesome? And they're like, yeah, that is awesome. So how would I do that? You say, you know, I'm so glad you mentioned that. You know, we went through a period of time in our business where we grew too fast and we made a lot of mistakes. And as we made those mistakes, we were able to come up with a ton of systems that fix those mistakes. And because we came up with those systems, guess how often those mistakes happen now? Person says, I guess they don't happen now. Like, exactly. And guess how many of those mistakes will happen with you? Customer's like, I guess they won't happen at all. And you say, yeah, and isn't that awesome?
Mm.
See that? So you can turn anything into that. Now, sometimes they're not realistic, but the idea is that you learn it doesn't matter what is said, especially when you're hit with resistance, especially for a child, is being bullied about their beliefs. If you can teach them that isn't that awesome, they will just mesmerize and confound their elders, their peers, anybody, and they won't be embarrassed about their beliefs.
I absolutely love that. I'm stoked for because we're at like level 1, I would say. I don't remember where I heard this, but when we go to restaurants, I always will ask our kids who wants to order for the table.
It's killer. It's huge.
Yeah, so they all go around and ask everyone of us, and then they make notes or draw pictures to if they can't spell yet to remember
It's
what
so good.
people want, and they have to practice looking the server in the eye and stuff. But yeah, I think the idea of like what actually matters and on like back to the schooling system or like our kids going to college or not going to college, uh it's like making a list of or prioritizing what are the actual skills that need to be learned or what are the especially when you think about what AI is going to turn upside down, like what actually matters in the next 10 years professionally, you know?
Mhm.
And like
That's
personal
exactly it,
interpersonal
Chris.
skills is probably the number one thing.
100%. 100%. We've known for a while that your ability to communicate was the most uh, impactful component of average salary was your communication skill level. It's not your school level or learn. It's like your ability to communicate. Of course, there's outliers, you know, but your ability to communicate is the greatest enhancing someone's ability to communicate. I think it's the greatest skill you can give them. It's the greatest gift you can give them. But the issue is, Chris, it's not like riding a bike. Like if you ride a bike, you'll always know how to ride a bike. You'll never forget to ride a bike. You can come in and out of effective communication very easily. So you can lose it as quickly as you found it.
You can lose it. That's interesting.
Very much so.
Just
Very much.
from not playing the game or do that like an example of not practicing that muscle.
Yeah, you don't practice the muscle, and then all of a sudden you turn into there's basically 4 quadrants of communication styles. The first one is the instructor. This person thinks they're good at asking questions, but they're not. Somebody comes to them with a problem, and they immediately just start telling them, after 1 or 2 questions, what life has taught them, therefore what they should do. And all the person learns, the audience, in this case, is if I come to Chris, he'll always have the answer for me. And this is why bosses get inundated with texts and messages all weekend, is because they've taught their team that if you have a problem, you come to me and I will solve it for you. That's the instructor. And that's not good. So the instructor really cares about the person they're talking to, and they're doing it out of like they want you to succeed. The problem is they've only taught you maybe that one skill, but you didn't work any of it out yourself. There's no path. So that's the instructor. The majority of leaders are actually instructors. That's the majority of communication styles. Then you have the people that continue to not ask questions very well. They're terrible at discovery, but it's all about them. So instead of being about the audience, it's all about them. And that person, somebody comes to them with a problem and they immediately say, you can stop. I already tell you, this is what you need to do. Here's what you need to do right now. All right. There's a lot of bosses like that. All right. We call this person a dictator. Dictator is just, quickly firing off commands. They think it's super efficient. And they can actually lead teams oftentimes pretty well, but the second they're not there, team falls apart. Company dies. There's no farm system. There's no leadership development. So the dictators come and they go. Okay, there's a burst of light and it quickly goes out. Then you've got the ones that are very good at asking questions, but it's all about themselves. All right. And we've
Getting
talked
the
about that
outcome
person.
that they
That's
want.
the lawyer.
Yeah.
That's the lawyer. Yeah. And then you've got the Pathfinder. Pathfinder's world class at asking questions with discovery. They really think in the form of a question and they make it all about their audience. And the one that grows is the audience. That's the Pathfinder. So most people listening to this right now are instructors. Number 2 is dictators. Number 3 is lawyers. Number 4 is Pathfinder. Sometimes people think they're Pathfinders, but they're not. If you just ask one question, you're not. If you just ask 2 questions, trust me, you're not.
I love that. So last question I have for you is, what is the question that you wish someone would ask you, but no one ever does?
I wish more people asked me about fear and failure.
Fear and failure?
Yeah, and failure. Because those are, I talk a lot about success, but it's based on the things that people ask me about, right? And now, to ask someone about their fears and their failures, there's got to be a level of trust. 3 P's need to be there. But I wish I got asked more about that. That would force me to think about it. And also it really humanizes the individual. Now, obviously you can try to do that, yourself when you're talking to someone, but fear and failure.
I guess I don't necessarily, I have stuff to say for myself, but can you give me say a little bit more about that? We got 5 more minutes.
Lots of times, you just take a regular interview like this, right? If you are able to, ask someone like myself, I'm not talking about you here per se, Chris, by the way, you do a great job. You listen well. I mean, you got all the traits. You're advanced. But just being willing to go there and say, so tell me about a time where you asked somebody a question and just completely blew up in your face. Why did it blow up in your face? And it's like, all right, put the person on their heels a little bit. That's going to give me an opportunity just to lean in and for the audience to hear that. I think that's really powerful. Just talking about some of my biggest fears, but my biggest fears about, there's got to be a better path. There's when it comes to X, tell me about your biggest fears. That's really, really powerful. Because I can tell you,
you
I
play
haven't
that game with the
answered most of those
Isn't That
questions.
Awesome game? Tell some.
Yeah. And that's actually a good exercise that you could do.
Yeah, you gave me a bunch of ideas to take back to the kids because, I just think that they're. I love the idea of just that. Isn't That Awesome game is the ultimate thing for peer pressure and just dealing with peer pressure in that adolescent, middle school, high school age.
Now, one powerful thing to your kids that's a life changer, and to your employees, and it's very hard for them to open up. You gotta vanguard this well. In other words, you gotta really set it up well. It's the classic question of, if you could change one thing about me, and you've got to choose one thing, got to choose one thing. If you could change one thing about me, what would it be? And I promise, whatever you say, I will receive it as a gift.
You ask your kids that, and then they ask you, or they ask each other, or it's
Well,
just as the leader, you ask,
yeah, but obviously you need to lead on this.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't tell your team how you feel about that until you've really got to open up to your team about some of your own weaknesses, or you got to let them give you hard feedback before they're going to full on receive yours.
Mhm.
And so that's a really big one. I've had crazy stories that came out of that I personally, and from others that I've coached, just like really, wild stuff. I mean, heck, one time I remember it was like, I did this with my wife, and I thought like I was crushing as a husband, and she just like started laying stuff out, and I was like, holy freak. I did not know this was the state of our marriage.
Mm.
She had resigned to where the level of husband I was. This was, I mean, a solid more than a decade ago. But, it was one of those seasons where I wasn't on my game. I was aloof to it though. And I was thinking I was on my game. And it wasn't until the specific question. So if you could change one thing, I ain't gonna lie, that one thing turned into like six things, but the, the message needed to be stated. And, I've been married for 27 years, something like that. And I can tell you right now, my wife's happier than she's ever been, full stop.
Well, Marcus, this has been fantastic. Got my wrap-up questions for you here. 3 book recommendations.
Well, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People once a year. It's one of the greatest self-help books, maybe the greatest self-help book of all time. Good to Great continues to be, I think, a pinnacle in many ways. And 10X is better than 2X. Tremendous.
I just went to listen to Jim Collins in San Francisco. He's releasing his new book.
Lucky Dog.
Yeah, he never does anything public.
Yeah. Yeah, people fly to him. That's the life that I want to like attain.
Yeah.
They fly to you, you charge them $100,000 to sit in your living room for 4 hours.
Yeah, he just a interesting guy. His new book is called What to Make of a Life. Just came out last week.
He did a really great one with Ferris on it, so I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a movie or show recommendation.
This is so cheesy, but I'm cool with it. I like, one of my top movies of all time continues to be Braveheart all these years later. And I tell you why. Because life in so many ways is about setting a vision and uniting people together. And it's like the culminating point of that movie is can we unite the clans? Like, that was like, can we bring them together? And if you lay a vision, it's incredible how you can bring people together. And of course, that's what William Wallace did so well, at least in the movie, even though the Scots are still mad about the fact that they didn't have a Scot do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And what's your preferred method, or how you've got many different, 5 businesses, lots of different calls to actions, I'm sure. What do you feel like is at this day and age, where is the best place for people to like go and get a taste of what you're up to now? Obviously, there's the books to buy, but anything outside of that?
If you want to get to know me well, it's just follow me on LinkedIn and read my stuff. So I put my most recent thoughts almost every single weekday. And I'm a really strong storyteller, so it's pretty intimate. And that's where I put my best stuff. That's why it's my lab. It's where I test. But you can also find me at marcus@marcussheridan.com. And you can email me, marcussheridan.com is my website, but you can email me directly, marcus@marcussheridan.com.
Awesome. Well, Marcus, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this. This was awesome, and really exciting to get a chance to ask you some questions directly.
Thank you, brother. You take care, man.
Thank you so much for listening. My name is Chris Kiefer, and my mission is to champion the relentless pursuit of purpose. And what that means to me is to be an example, a champion, someone that is in the trenches, working and showing and winning and trying and failing in how to pursue a deeper and more meaningful life with the people that I love, with my kids, with my friends, with our family, and also just be a champion and example of entrepreneurship and following my passion and doing what I believe I'm called to on this earth. And so if that inspires you in some way, please share this episode. If you want, like, subscribe, share, whatever, do all the stuff. It means the world to me to get this message and get these guests that I have out there. And if you're interested in any of the book recommendations or looking up other episodes, the movie list, you can visit my website, chriskiefer.com, for all the details on the show. And also check out the Boolean review software, as well as the Boolean automation consulting company that I own for home service businesses. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.